This doesn't sound like we're trying to reach undecided voters, but trying to mobilize the people we have. Do you see it that way?
Well, there certainly is a desire to mobilize voters that you believe are already in your camp. I do think there's a specific focus on young men, and some of that has to do with the fact that the early vote right now has indicated that at least young women are voting in higher proportions, and they are very much in favor of Harris. So this question of, are the young men going to, in fact, turn out? And can Donald Trump, who has attracted them in polls, actually have them get all the way to the ballot box?
That's a big question, of course. And it strikes me that it might be time better spent ensuring that people you know support you get to the polls than trying to identify this endangered species called the undecided voter. It speaks directly to the people who are surrounding the campaigns, right? If Donald Trump wanted to move to the center and find people who might otherwise be considering Kamala Harris, would he be on stage with Tucker Carlson tonight?
I don't think so. I mean, really what is going on is that the Harris campaign has a very sophisticated field organization. They have put a lot of money and a lot of effort and time into building it. And I think what you see with Elon Musk and the Trump campaign having outsourced their field program to his super PAC is that they're still identifying voters. And it is not the time to be identifying people. It is the time to be encouraging people and getting them across that finish line.
Well, and there's a question about whether any of this works for anybody anyway, Lara, and you know where I'm going here. We talked in the early edition of Balance of Power with Andra Gillespie, a political science professor at Emory University, surrounded by what's happening right now in Georgia, and had this to say about the impact of celeb endorsements this close to Election Day.
The literature in political science is actually somewhat dubious about whether or not celebrity endorsements matter in terms of persuading people to change their minds. The types of people who are going to show up to these events are already committed partisans who are already committed to Trump or Harris before they knew who was going to headline this particular rally. The most important thing about rallies and the most important thing about celebrity headliners is the earned media. So we're talking about them. We're giving free advertising to both the Trump and the Harris campaigns because of the fact that they got cool people to show up for them at a campaign, depending on what your definition of cool is.
I don't know your definition of cool here, Lara, but I do want to key off the idea of earned media because, you know, Donald Trump is supposed to be the king of earned media, and I'm told that that is why his campaign will spend $1 million to essentially rent out Madison Square Garden for the night to hold a big rally in the middle of New York City, which is, of course, a deep shade of blue. Is the idea correct, though, that this is a national election and he'll get monster coverage by doing this?
Well, he may get monster coverage, but that may not help him in the states that he needs the voters. I do think celebrity endorsements, as Dr. Gillespie said, are about headliners. They are about getting that media attention, but they do also kind of excite voters, right? They excite those who are already planning to vote for you, which is why this is the perfect time to roll them out. If you are going to get your people to the polls, you want to do it sort of now, get them feeling excited, get them going to an event and then to the ballot box the next day.
Got to ask you about the impact of early voting, because a lot of people aren't waiting around to find out who's endorsing whom. They've already cast their ballots. Lara, this is remarkable. Nevada joins the parade here. We're seeing an incredible turnout for Republicans. At last check, 39% of the roughly 245,000 ballots submitted by Monday evening, this is where the number came from, Republicans, 36% Democrats. Look at what we're seeing as well, meantime, in Georgia, topping 2 million ballots after the first day of early voting. I know there's a lot of noise around these numbers, and most states do not delineate between D's and R's. But what does this opening surge tell you about overall turnout?
What it tells me is we're going to have high turnout. I think there are a lot of people on both sides of the aisle that are excited about getting out there and participating in this election. I do believe most people see this as a high stakes election, and they see very stark choices before them. So there is a desire to get there and have your vote count as early as possible. It is also true that I hesitate to read into these partisan identification numbers, because I do anticipate that we will see some Democrats deciding to vote for Trump. It could be, Latino and Black men. There has been some suggestion of that. We could also see Republican women voting for Harris. And certainly we know that that is why former Congresswoman Liz Cheney campaigned with Vice President Harris in 3 suburban counties of 3 swing states the other day.
I want to ask you about some of the demographics that you've referred to here, because these campaigns are geo-targeting on a level that we've never seen before, as they chase, in the case of Kamala Harris, young men of color. In the case of Donald Trump, trying to keep those gains, but also blast out messages to women where he's showing some weakness. And this has become almost a gender-driven election here. Last night, in her interview on NBC News, Vice President Harris had this to say about the role of gender in the race. Lara, let's listen.
The experience that I am having is one in which it is clear that regardless of someone's gender, they want to know that their president has a plan to lower cost, that their president has a plan to secure America in the context of our position around the world. They want a president of the United States who honors our military, who understands the importance of America's leadership around international rules and norms, and that is regardless of gender.
You might like that answer, Lara, and I suspect that she was ready for that question, but this race is being framed in many ways as men versus women. Is that not right?
It is. And you don't need to have anyone talk about it for that to be the case. We have on the table 2 candidates of different genders, and we also have the situation where Roe versus Wade was overturned and reproductive rights are on the ballot. This is really a sort of central question for women in some ways, but also men. It really comes down to what sort of country are you imagining? Are you imagining a country where women have reproductive rights and control and autonomy of their bodies? Or are you imagining a world in which we are going back to, sort of a pre-Roe conception of a family and a church and a state that all actually weigh in on what the woman is allowed and permitted to do?